everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Flippin' the Barrel, a podcast where we interview leaders in the energy space to uncover and find out more about their career and life journeys. Today, we have Deidre Toups, who is the division president of Superior Energy Services. She has close to 30 years of experience in the oil and gas industry, and Deidre came from highly recommended past podcast guest, Lee Harns, who's the CEO of Altitude Energy Partners. And when Lee had suggested you, we were like, oh, we can't wait to meet her. And then when we actually did your pre-interview and learned about your story, we were overly impressed and just absolutely astonished on just how your whole entire journey has been from the very beginning when you were young to now just being such a leader in the energy space. And so we're just so looking forward to having our listeners learn more about you.
Awesome. Well, thanks for having me.
So, Deidre, tell me a little bit about what it was like growing up in a small town outside of Lafayette, Louisiana. You know, everyone always thinks of Lafayette as like the oil and gas kind of just industry. Everybody there, you know, quote unquote, works in the industry, but your parents did not. You were actually a farmer's daughter, and he was not very involved in the oil and gas industry. And neither was, too much of your upbringing. However, you did have family and friends, you know, that were in the industry, so you knew a little bit about it. Can you tell me a little bit about what it was like growing up, you know, right outside of Lafayette, as a farmer's daughter, and a little bit of the influence that the oil and gas industry, you know, kind of in the background did for you, and then later how that developed into you joining the industry?
Yeah, sure. No, I was a farmer's daughter. So, but like you said, everyone around us, there was always people that you knew, family members that worked in the oil and gas industry. It was kind of all around us. There's kind of, not many industries around in Lafayette. So there was farmers, and then there was the oil and gas industry. So it was kind of all around us. So I grew up, with my dad's business in agriculture. And but my sister husband, the oldest, married someone who worked in the oil field, and so that was kind of our first introduction into the family in the oil and gas industry. And so it was a lot of people that we worked with and knew was in the oil and gas industries.
Did you ever have aspirations though, as you were growing up, to be like, I don't want to be working in a farm. I want to go and see like Louisiana being such a big oil and gas place. Like, I want to see what that's about. Did that ever like interest you at all, or were you just more focused on, I need to go to school, I need to get my degree, and what were your thoughts at that time?
Yeah, no, I had no interest in the oil and gas industry. Like, it never really crossed my mind what industry I was going to be in. I knew from a very young age that I was going to be an accountant. Like, I knew that was my interest. When my dad, accountant, would come over to the office, I would, sit with him, and he would let me do little projects with him. And so I knew like finance and business and accounting was going to be my interest. I never knew which industry it would lead me to. So kind of ending up in the oil and gas industry was a surprise. It was always, but it was just a good opportunity. Like, the oil and gas industry offered everyone in our area an opportunity to earn a good living. And ending up in the oil and gas industry was a great opportunity for me to take my accounting background. And but no, definitely wasn't an aspiration or even a thought when I first started my career.
Knowing that you're a president now of an oil and gas service
Mhm.
company,
Right.
so you've come a long way.
Would have never thought that. Yeah.
What I always found so interesting when we do these podcasts is when people see where people are today, they never think about like the hardships that they went through.
Yeah.
And when we spoke with you, I was personally just like, I was taken back whenever you talked to us about what happened in your high school years. You were a 4.0 student, super dedicated to school. You were one of those really smart, like you knew what you wanted, career driven, and then you fell pregnant, which I could only imagine what that's like in high school. I remember seeing actually some of my, the students I worked with or that was there when I was in school, like same thing, fell pregnant, and it was very difficult for them to finish. You had a shame factor about yourself at this time, which I could only understand what that would be like. I'm sure people everywhere you went, look at this young girl, she's pregnant. But you continued on, even though, you held that shame for a while. You ended up marrying the man that you fell pregnant with, and you're still married today. But at that time, he was shipped off to Germany, and you're about 17 years old. So not only were you pregnant with a newborn, but then you had to stop school because you had to follow him to Germany. And you weren't in school anymore, and it kind of made you feel like, what am I doing? Like, who am I? And to look at where you're at today, it's absolutely incredible to see that this was a situation in your life. Can you talk to us about, during those teenage years when you felt like that, that teenage mom that we saw on TV? Like, how
Mhm.
did you overcome that difficult time in your life and really get yourself back on track?
Yeah, well, that was definitely the hardest time of my life. And when you're past it and you look back at those times of your life, it's always easy to see how, definitely going through those hard times, how you learned a lot, and how it definitely made me who I am today. And I learned a lot from those lessons. But when you're kind of in the midst of that storm, and there's very low visibility, and it's easy to get caught up in that, just the being overcome by fear and doubt, and a lot of concern. And there was just, like I said, there was not a lot of visibility. So I was really, like, is this all there is for me? Am I going to be just a stay-at-home mom, like my mom was? Am I going to be, um, you know what is my life going to look like? And so it was a tough time in my life. And yeah, I had to walk through a lot of shame. Definitely had made some wrong decisions, and a lot of disappointment. I felt like I had disappointed my parents, and I had disappointed a lot of people in my life, and knew that I wasn't, living up to who I was, who God had made me to be. And so, I was fortunate that the guy that I had got pregnant with was there to support me, and that we had, he was there to walk through that storm with me, and at that time in my life. And so, he did join the army, and they shipped us off to Germany, which, was made it even harder because we didn't have family around us. And so, yeah, I mean, it was tough times, and we just had to walk through it, but all along, I think I clung to my faith, and I knew that God had made me for more, and I knew that I was meant to do more, and I had a lot of gifts and a lot of talents that I was meant to do more with. And so, we pushed through that. I continued to kind of learn to forgive myself for the mistakes that I had made, and continue to look for opportunities where I could grow personally. And and then, ultimately, I was blessed with the gift of a beautiful son. And so we got through that time in our lives, and I eventually came back to the States, and enrolled in college, and continued on my education. And so we're not still married today, but I'm still thankful for the role that he played in my life. And like I said, we have a beautiful son for it, and got my career back on track. But definitely learned some hard lessons in life. And but it's when you walk through those hard times in life that you see, like, what you're capable of. And yeah, it's it was a tough journey, but we learned a lot about life, and what adversity teaches you.
Uh, Thank you so much for being so open and vulnerable to sharing that story. I know when Jamie and I first heard it, we couldn't believe it because how successful and just like well put together you are now, and like running a company, and you have, two other kids as well, I believe. And
Mhm.
just sometimes I think when you that could happen to you early on of just mistakes or whatever it is in your teen years, a lot of people put of like, oh, her life is over, that kind of just even on yourself of like, oh, okay, well, I can no longer be who I wanted to be because of maybe certain challenges that happened. But you proved everybody wrong, that, you owned it, you forgave yourself, you let that shame kind of to the side, and you moved on, and you were really gifted in terms of school and being smart. And I remember you mentioned to us that you were just like a really good student. And so school for you was really important. And I know that probably having a young child at that time and going back to school, that's not an easy task. That's like 2 time full-time jobs, and you have to be
Right.
present at home but also kind of get your schooling. When you went back to school and you graduated, how did you navigate that, school, mom? Did you have your parents help you, or maybe like your husband's parents? How did you kind of get your life up and running when you came back to the US?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I had a huge network of support, and I had a lot of people supporting me and a lot of people encouraging me. And so, yeah, I was probably more the one saying, that, beating myself up about it, and so a lot of people encouraging me that I was capable. And so I'm thankful for that. And I had a big network, but you really got to learn to, you got to be grateful for that, and you got to be thankful and appreciate the support that you are getting, and learn to make requests, very effective requests, and just be grateful for their support. And that was one thing that I couldn't have done it without all of their help. But it wasn't easy. Yeah, it's tough to go back to school. And I was very committed, when I did come back to school. And a lot of the kids my age were in college, and they didn't have the obligations that I had. So, they weren't, they were living the college life, a different lifestyle than I was.
Mhm.
But, I was committed and ready to get my degree so I could get my career going, and support my family. And, so yeah, I was very driven and very ready to get my career going. So yeah.
Which that's what you did. I mean, right out of college, you got your first job offer, public accounting, for KMPG. And being a single mom, you didn't think it would be a good idea to move to New Orleans, and so instead you decided to stay to a regional firm, which makes more sense because you had support, like you were talking about.
Right.
Women have, I think, a hard time asking for that support, and I'd love to hear your advice for those that are going through that journey as a single mom, or even honestly with a husband. It's still difficult. How can one ask for help? And moms everywhere really need to, I think, understand that it's not solely on them.
Yeah. Well, we hear it all the time, and everyone always asks the question about how do we balance life and career and family and all that, as women, working. And that's, what I always say is that, first of all, we got to give up on thinking that we have to do it perfectly. And we've got to learn to make requests. We've got to learn to ask for help. We got to learn to let other people help us. And, we try to do too much ourselves. And so, learning, to ask people for help when we need it. And we've got to learn to let people help us. So, for me, it was even getting the kids involved in that, is getting the kids, making it clear that, look, if this house is going to work and it's going to run smoothly, we're all going to have to pitch in. And so it was a team effort. And my husband was always very supportive of my career. So he helped with the household and making it work. And my parents helped, and his parents helped. And that's just the only way you can make it all work. Or else we'll drive ourselves in the ground, or we'll end up pulling back on our careers. And,
Mhm.
that just happens way too often.
Yeah,
Mhm.
that's great advice. And it goes back to just trying to do it all and feeling the pressure of, we need to be a good mom, we need to be a good wife, we need to be a good worker. And it's like it all falls on our shoulders, versus everybody in this household needs to contribute a little bit and kind
Right.
of make that family work, everybody together, not just
Yeah,
mom. Um,
exactly.
so, you spent almost 5 years at that kind of firm in Broussard, and then you joined HB Rentals, which you spent 19-ish years there. You were their
Right.
chief financial officer. You did,
Mhm.
VP of operations and then president, and you just kind of climbed the corporate ladder in this company. What we wanted to ask you on this point is, it was very much, oil and gas in, Louisiana. And how did you deal, especially at that time, in the early 2000s, where maybe there wasn't a lot of women in the rooms that you were in, there was not a lot of women in the tables where you were sitting at, and also they're very technical sometimes when it comes to like the oil and gas industry, and like, oh, you didn't spend time in the field, or you don't know all of these terms, etc. How did you deal with kind of having to prove yourself or even know that you know what you are talking about when maybe they would perceive you as like you've never really worked in the industry yet, and how can you be running a company?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, well, I think that a lot of us make the mistake of trying to think that we have to prove ourselves, and so I think I learned early on that that wasn't going to work, and so I knew that I was where I was for a reason, and so my gift and my strength was around the finance side. That's what I knew. That's what I was good at, and everything else I didn't know. I knew what I knew, and I knew what I didn't know, and I didn't try to pretend that I knew anything that I didn't. So when the topics or when the conversation got to the technical side of the industry, particularly HB wasn't a very technical field; it was rig accommodations. But when I moved over to Stabil Drill and we started talking about downhole drilling tools, I didn't know anything about it. And so, I remember them talking about, a tool not being fully gauged, and I had no idea what they were talking about. And I just said, guys, can you explain to me what I'm sorry, my phone's going off. I'm going to put it on silent for us. Um, and I said, guys, can you explain to me what that means? And here I am, the president of the company, and I'm, all of these guys' boss. And, I know that, I'm thinking I could pretend that I know what they're talking about, but they'll see right through me. Or I can ask them, to help me to understand so that I can make the right decisions. And so, and I find that, when I'm authentic and I'm vulnerable, I can, being vulnerable is scary because, I face that they could all think I'm stupid and they can think I'm an idiot and then what am I doing here? But it's the only way for me to continue to learn. And I think that people embrace that, and people are, and it's way better than trying to pretend that you know something that you don't know. Um, and so I've continued to learn a lot in my career by showing up that way. And yeah, and so they respect me for what I do know, and they'll, when I get into a meeting and they know that it's a topic that is outside of my competency, then they'll stop and they'll say, Deidre, here's what you need to know about that, so that I can make the right decisions. And I think that everyone around me has always been very willing, to help me to continue to learn and help me to make the right decisions along the way, by being honest and vulnerable in those areas. So.
I want to take a step back, and because I remember there was a part in your journey where a colleague of yours was working for a small service company in Louisiana, and then they hired you as a CFO, which is a huge role. And I'd love to know, like, what was your first take on like taking on a role at this caliber, and how did you feel about being in the oil and gas industry, which is male dominated, and here you are in a role that not very many women hold in the oil and gas industry. How do you think you were perceived, and then also taking that risk on yourself? What made you have that confidence? Because I think that's one thing that we see a lot of women lack, is that confidence to like ask for the role, take on the position, not have that fear of like, can I do it? What were your thoughts during that time, and what do you think kind of gave you the opportunity to take on such a big role at this company?
Well, I think, when it was going into the oil and gas industry, just knowing that it was cyclical was a bit scary, knowing that my husband was already in it, where we kind of all, putting ourselves too many eggs in one basket, so to say, was a little bit of a risk for us. But, again, it was a good opportunity to make good money for the family. I think that I felt like I was capable to do the job, but yeah, it was a bit bigger than what I had done before. For me, the it was an opportunity in public accounting. You're dealing with everyone else's problems, so you're kind of looking at everybody else's finances and their businesses, and it's their problems. And so I wanted the opportunity to kind of have some ownership over the business and be able to solve problems for the business, and it be my, my business. And so I was looking forward to that. So, that encouraged me. And, I don't know. I grew up in a kind of all boys neighborhood, and kind of always had to play ball with the guys. So
Mhm.
that didn't really intimidate me. I was always kind of, one of the guys. Um, so that didn't really intimidate me. I was kind of ready for that. So, um, yeah, I just kind of stepped up. And I think someone had told me once before, like, that men, like, men apply for jobs, and like they are like, um, they have like one quality out of the 10 that they're being asked for, and they just apply anyway. And women like think they have to have all 10 of them before they apply. And so, I think I had heard that before, and I was like, well, I think I could do like half of the things that this job requires. So I think I'm going to go ahead and try it. So, yeah,
No, that's great advice. That's great advice. And obviously, sometimes we underestimate ourselves a lot.
right.
And look at you, you spent 17 years there and continued to climb the ladder. So obviously, that CFO role was an easy check. Um, something we wanted to get into, and I remember when we talked to you about this, it was a hard conversation, I think, for all of us, because, we're all three of us are mothers, we're all spouses, we're all very, career driven. But there's a point where you kind of have to sit with your family and figure out, like, okay, how's everybody feeling about this? How's it going, right? Like a check-in. And I think with how we put so much pressure on ourselves, as well as like society, of like all these things that we need to be really good at, and then we have to have it all figured out. There was a point where you were traveling a lot. You were an executive at this point, traveling a lot. You were a little bit away from home because you had to. Your work was really demanding. You had to be international, so you were gone for multiple days out of the month, etc. And there was a point where you mentioned, and I want you to tell the story, but your husband kind of got mad about the soap not being available at home. Like, I think there was no more soap, and he kind of like lost it. And this was like a turning point in everybody's kind of life. And even you checking in with your daughter, where she was thinking maybe you weren't part of her schooling and missing field trips and things like that. And you had to have this conversation with your executive coach and I think at some point, a lot of executives will have this where maybe a spouse will say something, or a kid will say like, oh, you missed another soccer game or something. Can you tell us a little bit? Because I know that was a hard conversation. And I remember you even talking with your executive coach about it, and you had to reflect on a lot of things. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, it's kind of one of those defining moments in your career where you really have to, say like, all right, like, how's this? Yeah, kind of like you said, like, how's this working? And you're at that pivotal point in your career where you're like, it's demanding, and you're like, is it working? Is it working for the family? And so, um, it was kind of that one of those instances where it was the straw that broke the camel's back for me. Um, and a lot of things were just piling up on us. And, like you said, a lot of travel, a lot of things. And you got this, you're doing it all, but you kind of got these beliefs that, you kind of question, like, okay, I got a really successful career and things are going really well there, but I'm holding this belief that I'm trading off one for the other. So if my career is really successful, then then I must be, but I must not be a really good mom, right? So I'm it's like I can't be good at all of them. So one of them's got to suffer. If my career is successful, then I must not be a great wife and a great mom, because I'm not the mom that's going to all the field trips. I'm not the mom that's cooking supper every night. I don't get the laundry done every day, and all these things. And so, it's like I would get frustrated because I don't do the laundry every day. We have a housekeeper that would come in and do it. And so when my kids asked where a certain piece of clothes was, I didn't know because I didn't do the laundry. And so I had this guilt about that. And, it's like, God, I should know those things. I'm their mom, and I can't tell them where their, favorite pair of jeans are. And so those kind of things, and so you had this guilt about you just tugging on you that, like, gosh, I'm not that perfect mom. I'm not that great mom that I should be. And then I feel like, as we teach our kids how to push our buttons, and kids are, they're gonna
They're
say
gonna
what they,
do it.
yeah,
Yeah,
they're
they're
gonna
smart.
say what they need to say to get their way, right? So when you got and my youngest was about 8 at the time, and so when she wanted me there, she would say what she needed to say to make me feel bad about it. So if she wanted me at the field trip, she would play that card. She would say like, "Mom, you're never at any field trips," and that's all she needed to say to get my guilt card working. So I would feel really bad that, oh, gosh, there it is, there it's showing up. I'm that bad mom. So that was all that guilt. And so, and then my husband, sends me a text and he's like, "There's no darn soap in the house." And then like I had a complete meltdown when I got to work. And it was like, of course he's mad. He's soaking wet. He gets out of the shower to find another bar of soap and there's none in the cabinet. And it really wasn't that big of a deal, but to me, it was just that straw that broke the camel's back. Is that it was like it showed up for me again. Is like, there it is again. I'm just a bad wife, bad mom, and I'm over here having this great career. I'm showing up at work and I'm doing all these great things, and my house is falling apart. And I'm not at a field trip, and there's no soap in it. And so I had this guilt. And so I happened to have a meeting with a coach, executive coach that morning, and she shows up and I'm in tears and I'm a mess. And I'm like, there it is. Like, I got to quit my job. And she's like, "What are you talking about?" And I was like, the most important thing in life is my kids and my husband, and I'm failing at that. And, I'm doing good over here, but I'm failing at what's really important. And so the best advice she gave me was, to go home and ask my kids and my husband what was really important, in being a wife and a mother. And so, long story short, they didn't say it was about soap or field trips. They said it was about. They said it was that I was there for the important conversations, that I taught them about their faith, and that, for my husband, he actually said it was about the fact that I taught my girls that they could be anything that they wanted to be. So that was a good exercise. And so what I did learn from that is that sometimes we hold beliefs as if they're a truth. And so for me, that belief that it was a trade-off, was a limiting belief that was causing me a whole lot of guilt. And that I needed to look at that belief and realize that it didn't have to be a trade-off, and that I could actually be good at both, and that I just needed, to stand. I needed to let go of that belief and trade it for a different one. And so from that point forward, I learned to choose that I could be good at both. I could have a successful career. I could be a great wife, and I could be a great mom. Um, and I still wouldn't make all the field trips. and that, and that's okay. So
I mean, I remember when we spoke about this, it was just like one of those things we were both just like, we were learning so much from you as you were telling us the advice, which is
yeah,
something that I do think is so important for us to share, because like you need to hear that and you need to go home and ask those questions, because we keep it all in our head and then we think all these things and half of them aren't even true.
I
And
know.
so I love that the executive coach told you that. Did having that executive coach, did it help you in other ways? I know this was a very, profound moment where it was extremely beneficial, but I'd love to hear like anything else that maybe this executive coach has helped you in your development or get to where you are today.
Oh, absolutely. I recommend everyone any opportunity they get, to get coaching. I spend a lot of time even now, with, coaching and development, because it's constant, and you never stop learning just how to have good conversations, how to get better perspectives, and I just think it's very helpful, all the time. But really, the most effective thing I think is how to have effective conversations with employees, with peers, even with customers. I think that's, you and getting outside perspectives, because the only perspectives we have is what is our own, and they're limited. So it's always helpful to get someone's outside perspectives.
I love that. And you're right. I think if you can get a coach, or it doesn't even have to be like expensive executive coach if you're not at those levels, but even just mentors or people that you can
Mhm.
ask questions to, listening
Right.
to this podcast and getting literally free advice from
Mhm.
people who've been very successful. But it's good to just learn from other people instead of going through it yourself and making those mistakes when you can take advice from someone who's been through it. So I love that you mentioned that. And one of the last questions we had for you is, you have close to 30 years, I think, in the industry, like a very long time. You're very successful. You're a mother, wife, etc. What do you think is keeping women from climbing that ladder or being in successful places like yourself? Because, the numbers have obviously moved a little bit, but the percentage is still quite low for presidents of oil and gas service companies or even operators, etc. What do you think, just looking at, maybe you've met so many women throughout the past that maybe have dropped off or stayed sideways in roles and not pursued more? What do you think is something that's either like we're holding ourselves back? Is it the workplace? Is it something that companies can do? What's your advice on that? How can we move the needle?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard, but women pull back on their careers. I see it all the time. You know, first of all, they don't see themselves in these roles. They have to believe that they're capable of holding these positions,
Mhm.
and so many women don't. And so, I think that's the first thing, is that they have to have a belief, and they have to believe in themselves that they can hold these positions. Because I think that's the first thing, is that they don't take a seat at the table. You know, they don't speak up in meetings. They don't offer their ideas. And so, they're not heard. Their voices aren't heard. And so, that's one of the things that keep them from getting noticed, and their ideas and their perspectives don't get heard. So, I think that's the first step. And then the second thing is, when they do get the opportunities, they pull back, because they're afraid of the commitment. They're afraid of, the demand that it's going to have on their families, and whether or not it can, whether or not it can work. And so,
Mhm.
my advice is that it can, and they just need to make effective requests. They need to have the hard conversations, and they need to kind of define, like, this is how it's going to work. This is how it's going to work for me. And I think that, I mean, girls like you are proving it, and it's, we're seeing it now. So I'm excited to see that, and I think the more we set examples that it's possible, I think others can see that, that it can work.
Mhm. I couldn't agree more that I think it's just so important for us to also share our journeys, and like you sharing yours today on the podcast is, I think,
Mhm.
just one of those steps, because I believe nobody would have thought that your beginning was your beginning, and what you overcame. And I know Massiel and I were just like absolutely astonished because we see the success of where you are, and of course, we believe that you are talented, like that's not a question. But to see what you overcame, I think is really what is that turning point in people's stories. It's like, wow, so many times do we play victims, especially as women, and that's not helping anybody, and especially not helping us. And you were just one of those examples of, like, you never did play the victim card, and you continued on, and look at where you're at today. I'm just so inspired by your story, and just thank you so much for sharing those vulnerable moments, and kind of what you had to go through, because it's definitely sensitive and it's not easy to talk about, especially on a
Right.
platform that anybody could listen to it.
Yeah. It's an incredibly shameful time in my life, I guess. It's not something that I'm really proud of, but you're right. I mean, I do tell the story only because I just want people to know that, like, our mistakes from our past don't have to define us forever. Like, we can overcome them, we can move forward, and that doesn't have to define who we are the rest of our lives.
I love that. I wanted to add one thing that you mentioned, because we hear it quite often. So one was, supposedly a lot of times when women receive a letter or even like a job offer or a promotion, a lot of them will not take it or doubt so much that they're able to do it, even though like the company or that manager is kind of, placing a bet on you or like giving you that opportunity. And so, I think we had someone recently came on the podcast, and she mentioned that she saw that a lot as a manager and executive in the industry who was giving offers to women, and they were the first to be like, oh, I don't know if I could do it, or it was like that doubt. And I think that's exactly what you mentioned of like the belief that you can see yourself in those positions, that you see yourself in other people too. And I think, it is changing as we see more women like yourself holding these positions. It opens everybody else's mindset of, okay, if she can do it, I can do it too. And so, this is proof of your podcast that, more and more women are going to continue to look up to women like yourself that are really paving the path and that are, in those leadership positions to continue to affect change and give more opportunities to women, and just show women that you don't have to be perfect. You don't have to have it all, figure it out, but that you can do it at the end of the day. And you're proof of that. And many other women that come on the podcast, keep proving that you can do it all.
And I mean, I think it's okay to fail too. It's okay to try and not succeed, even if you don't. But it's better to do that than to not try at all. I mean, I've always said that too. I mean, if so many people have offered me an opportunity, and sometimes I said, I don't know if I can do it. And I said, well, if they're offering me the opportunity, they must think I can. Or they wouldn't be offering me the opportunity. So I'm going to try. I'm going to give it, and I know I'm going to work hard and I'm going to do my best. And if that's not good enough, then oh well. But I'll take the opportunity. I'll try. And so far, I've succeeded in most of them. I've failed at some. I've made some mistakes, but for the most part, a lot of those opportunities, I've done well with them. So, that's what I said. If people are willing to give you the opportunity, take it, give it a shot, do your best and go for it. You never know what you're capable of if you don't try.
Thank you. And thank you so much for ending on such a positive and great note that we all need to hear. So just thank you again for your time. And if you like this podcast, please like, subscribe, leave us a comment. We love to hear from you. And follow our other sister podcast, Energy If You Know, You Know. And we're looking forward to having the next guest. So thank you so much, Deidre, for all of the time you spent with us today and sharing your incredible story.
Thanks, girls.